Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Remember, if you love film, gaming, or television content, please consider clicking that subscribe button because it is time to talk about the very controversial show, The Idol. I will be talking full spoilers here, so you have been warned. And let's get into it. So as you are probably well aware of, this show has not been received very well from pretty much everyone. I actually felt like after the first episode, I was maybe one of 5 people that actually didn't mind the show and enjoyed a lot of the ideas that it had. Sure, there were definitely some flaws, but in my impressions video, I came out of this very positive and eager to see more of this show and how they're really going to progress this story, because I felt like it was just not right to label this show as a failure after one episode. So I have now watched the entire season and here are my thoughts. So following on from what I thought was a pretty decent start, The Idol had some very interesting ideas that it wanted to play around with, like the way that all these superstars kind of get treated behind closed doors. I hear some people say that this is a realistic interpretation, but I don't feel like that's for us to really decide. We aren't from Hollywood, we aren't from that space, so how can we relate to the things that are going on here? How can we understand the types of issues that are being presented here? Sure, there are definitely cases of abuse and exploitation among Hollywood and the music industry for sure, but we don't know fully how it goes down or what's really happening until long after it happens and then it comes out. I think the people behind this show had some very interesting ideas. I'm someone who actually enjoys a lot of what Sam Levinson does. I think Euphoria is a bold new vision in television, and while it does have its flaws, it is a really fresh show that has a very unique perspective. And I think he brings some of those stylistic choices with a lot of youthful energy into The Idol. And I actually like those stylistic choices. This was shot on film and it looks gorgeous. The Weeknd is also a writer. I am a massive fan of his music. And I was very interested to see how he was going to perform in a TV sense, where it seemed like he does have a passion for acting. And it was really interesting to see what he was going to do in this space. I think that it was a bit hit and miss. I'm a lot more kind on his performance than a lot of other people because I take into account the fact that this is really his first performance. He is still pretty much an amateur, and there are a lot of amateur mistakes in this. The performance doesn't hit all the time, but I think there were moments that show that he does have some potential if he were to hone his craft a little bit more. And in future TV shows or movies, we might see a lot more stronger of a performance. However, in The Idol, I think he's given a pretty challenging role, which he has boldly taken on, but he doesn't always execute his lines in the right sense. He's always going for a bigger is better approach. And while I can understand where he's coming from to try and get some kind of powerful scene going, you don't always need to be shouting and being crazy to really grab the viewer's attention. Sometimes nuance is what matters. And for Tedros, the character he's playing, it's not always there. A lot of it is on the nose, so there's not too much to discover under the surface. I also think the use of sex in this show was something that I thought was okay in the beginning, where it was used as a form of manipulation within the show, so it had some sort of purpose for being in there. But as the show progresses, it felt very unnecessary to the point where it was actually detracting from the quality of this. A lot of people really don't like this show for the way that it showcases these sex scenes. And I have to agree with a lot of people here. It doesn't work a lot of the time. It doesn't work as a plot device, as a form of manipulation. It doesn't really work as this sexy kind of spectacle that I think it wants to do. And it doesn't really convey a whole lot after that first episode. And to me, it gets worse and worse, and its representation just becomes very flawed in my opinion. We hit episode 3, which to me is the worst episode by far. And the problem that I have with that is the way that it showcases sex and abuse. Jocelyn, the character played by Lily Rose-Depp, who I think plays it pretty well, suffers some abuse from her mother in her childhood. And they're kind of questioning about whether that is what leads to her creativity. Jocelyn buys into that idea, asks Tedros to get the hairbrush that her mother beat her with, and proceeds to beat Jocelyn again with it. And the thing that really made my blood boil with that scene was afterwards, where it seemed like she liked it, because I believe she thanks Tedros after that whole event happened. And to me, that was a really disgusting display and kind of goes into the whole male fantasy aspects that this has been truly well-deservedly criticized for. Because I'm not someone to speak on this, but it just doesn't seem like a very necessary interpretation. I don't think too many people are like this. I just felt like it was very unnatural, uncomfortable, and not in a purposeful sense. I know some of you will say, well, that was the purpose, to make you feel uncomfortable. I felt like it was pointless, and to me doesn't actually add that much in the grand scheme of the show. So I'm kind of thinking, why is it really there? And then once again, it plays into the whole notion that people think that this might be a more realistic sense of this kind of abuse. Once again, how do we know that? We don't live in this space. How do we know that that's a realistic interpretation? You know about that just as much as I do, which is not a whole lot, just apart from stuff that we have seen on social media or done in our own research. We haven't lived in those shoes because we're not Hollywood superstars that have suffered this form of abuse that has led to some sort of creative eureka moment. But to me, that was the only episode that I truly outright hated. The majority of them I didn't actually mind. Apart from the overuse of sex, I like the idea of this whole cult aspect and Tedros. I wanted to know more about his backstory because he seems like a really interesting character. There's a lot under the surface, I think, in this character that the show doesn't really want to explore too much. And it's not until the end that we get a little bit of a snippet of the fact that he was kind of a pathetic loser before he became this kind of cult leader that was worshipped amongst all these people. You see, I like that idea, and I wish that they had explored that early on and really built off that properly instead of giving us a one-sentence summary. If we had started with that aspect and really built on it, and it would have really shown why Tedros is like this and kind of abuses all these people to the point where they kind of worship him and have this kind of Stockholm syndrome effect. Because to know where he came from and to understand why he is this really terrible person gives you a tiny bit of sympathy towards him, or some sort of moment where in some aspect you can kind of relate to what he's doing, which is what a lot of good villains have. A good villain is someone that you can kind of understand where they're coming from. You don't agree with any of the actions that they're going to be doing, but you agree that what happened to them in the past was definitely undeserved. And for Tedros, that definitely is there, but it's not explored properly. And to me, that is a real shame because this show could have been so much better if we had gone down that route. Jocelyn, the other main character, as I said, played by Lily Rose-Depp, is pretty interesting herself. As I said in my impressions video, she's kind of like a Britney Spears character where she is very damaged in terms of her mental health and she's been through a lot in her past, but she's this mega superstar. I kind of like a lot of the twists and turns that go into Jocelyn's decision making, but I don't really like what they do at the end of the show because it kind of justifies a lot of the abuse that she got put through by Tedros. She is emotionally manipulated. It almost feels like sexual assault, a lot of these scenes. It is consensual, so I guess it's kind of in that BDSM range. But it kind of comes across a lot of 50 Shades of Grey-esque, where it's trying to be sexy, yet controversial. And to me, it's not really doing either. It kind of is stuck in this middle space where it's a little bit awkward and uncomfortable. And once again, not in the way that the show is intending it to be. But in the end, Jocelyn basically takes a lot of these cult members that Tedros has tried to mold into superstars. She's taken them for herself and they end up being a lot of the opening acts to her tour and getting that exposure where they can become superstars because they're all so talented. Susanna's son is one of these, and she's a very talented singer, and a lot of the songs that she performs I thought were really, really incredible. And that's another thing I want to speak to. The soundtrack is amazing. As I said, I'm a fan of The Weeknd's music, so I have listened to a lot of the songs that have featured in this show just in my own time, because the songs I think are really great, and to me, carry a lot more depth than a lot of the actions that actually take place on screen. I think that also goes into The Weeknd's ability to write and perform music. He's a lot more stronger in that aspect than in these performing arts, which, as I said, I think there is talent there and I think there is potential, but he's not quite there yet. But Jocelyn, it seems like, breaks off from Tedros completely, sleeps with her ex while he is listening, and just basically cuts him out completely, gets his reputation out into the world, and Tedros is completely ruined. But at the end of the show, she gets back with him, and I guess it kind of shows that the power dynamics in this relationship have changed by the orders that she gives Tedros at the end of the show, and he basically succumbs and listens to her. I don't really like that idea that the show is trying to convey this messaging of that this abuse was justified in a sense because it brought her out of her shell again to make all this creative musical choices that really got her back into superstardom again and become the idol. I think that idea is just plain wrong, and I don't know what purpose it serves at all, and I don't think there really is one, to be honest with you. I just really don't like that creative choice at all. Because Tedros is not a good person. You know, things aren't black and white. I understand that. And this show definitely wants to have that aura about it where these characters definitely do a lot of wrongdoing, but there's a justification for it in some way. But the show doesn't really communicate that properly enough to really bring that home by the end. By the end, we're getting a sense of Sam Levinson and The Weeknd, who wrote this show, are condoning this type of behavior. And I don't think that is their intended meaning behind the show, but it does come across that way. And also the more reasonable characters, like Rachel Sennett's character, they kind of get called stupid or not understanding what Jocelyn is trying to do, when in fact they seem like a character that just wants the best for them truly and wants to make sure that they're safe. And by the end of the show, she just keeps getting ignored, and it once again kind of justifies this behavior that has happened to Jocelyn. It is not right what has happened to her in this situation. It is truly messed up. She's going through all of this manipulation, and it seems like mission accomplished from Tedros. I also really don't like the costume design. I understand that it's trying to be provocative and have this energy that sex sells. And in the music industry, that is definitely the case. You know, as we're progressing, a lot of the attire that these musicians wear are becoming more and more revealing to the point where it is kind of not suitable for a lot of children that are exposed to this music early on through TikTok or whatever. But this really crosses the line where it basically looks like stripper attire. There's really no other way to go about it. It is more rare that Jocelyn is fully clothed in this show. You are always seeing some part of her body that is usually supposed to be kept private, and I don't really like its implementation into the show because it once again is trying to be this whole sexy thing, but it just really doesn't come across that way to me. There are also quite a few loose threads in this show, like the fact that someone gets framed for sexually assaulting someone when they actually didn't, and it kind of wants to touch on that cancel culture, how people are so quick to ruin someone's career before we've even justified why we're actually doing that. And it is once again so shallow that it has no effect. It plays out in one episode and then it gets a couple of mentions in the finale, and we kind of left hanging in that regard. We actually don't know the result of that. We get a little bit of an inclination of what they're going to do to fix this situation, but we actually never see anything happen in that regard. So I'm kind of questioning what happened to this guy. Is his career still ruined? Because nothing that I have seen this show do has shown that they've done anything to fix this. But going back to positives, I really love the supporting cast. I think they're all very talented. A lot of the people on Jocelyn's side, like Haim, Destiny, and Eli Roth's character, were just really, really great, I think, and they're all really brilliantly performed. I especially loved Eli Roth's character, and it was a bit of a shame that he wasn't in the show more because I think he had a really great presence to him, to be honest. And the same could actually be said for Destiny and Haim, especially Destiny. She has some really great scenes in this, and I think that she's one of the standouts in the entire cast. Honestly, I don't know, man. I really do like a lot of aspects to this show. I really love the concept behind it. As I said, I love this whole cult aspect and what they're trying to do with making all these superstars. And Tedros is a fascinating character. It's all there. I can see a phenomenal show in this package, but it's just not executed in a way that I thought was very satisfying. And its decisions to focus on a lot of the sexual aspects for large portions of the show kind of wasted what little time they had. This was a 5-episode miniseries in a sense. We need to get to the point. We can't be wasting time with all these sex scenes. We need to be telling a coherent, efficient story. And for a lot of the time, that wasn't happening. So it was kind of frustrating. I can understand a lot of the criticism that this has been getting. But if you're someone who enjoys this show, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think there are things to really enjoy and appreciate in this show. I am someone who likes this probably a lot more than most people, but I don't love it. I definitely don't think it's as good as Euphoria. I don't think that I would really rewatch this again. I'm a little bit disappointed, and especially watching this so close to something like Succession, which is a fucking masterpiece of a show, it kind of hurts this even more when you see the absolute pinnacle of TV play out next to this more experimental kind of television show. This is not just HBO, this is also an A24 show like Euphoria. So I kind of wasn't too surprised in the direction that this headed in. A24 are willing to be behind a lot of wacky stuff, and this is definitely in that catalog. I'd honestly prefer watching this over some of the absolute rubbish movies I've been seeing, like The Flash or Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, where you're just using some IP to make easy money. I like that this tried something different. It was bold, it was experimental. It didn't pay off the way that I wanted it to, but I can respect the ambition, and I have to respect Sam Levinson and The Weeknd for trying something here. Did it convey the messages that I think that it wanted to tell? Not really, not as effectively as it could, but it does have some interesting elements that didn't make this feel like a waste of time for me personally. If I were to give this a score, it's a 2.5 out of 5. I think it's in that kind of average range. As I said, I think there are some moments I think that really work and then some others that really don't, with one episode in episode 3 being pretty much disgusting. But other than that, it's kind of up to your interpretation whether you really enjoy it or not. I really think there was an effective way to tell the story, and it just didn't happen, and that's a shame. But, on to the next one. Anyway, those are my thoughts towards The Idol. I really hope you enjoyed this video. This has been a long time coming. I've been covering the show since the first trailer came out, and I can't believe I've completely seen it now. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.